President Trump signing into law the Laken-Riley Act. There's the Democratic National Committee that's coming up with its vote for its new chair. And you have so much going on Capitol Hill with these nominations. Here to discuss it all, Maura Gillespie, who advised former Speaker John Boehner and former Congressman Adam Kinzinger, and Jaime Moore. He's the former director of the Office for the Democratic National Committee chair. Great to be here with both of you. Let's begin, though, with Governor Josh Green was just in your chairs here a moment ago, from Democrat from Hawaii, very sharply critical of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The question I have for both of you, and we'll begin with Maura, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had a different kind of coalition. He had Democrats who were anti-establishment, backing him in his initial bid against President Biden. Then he became supportive of President Trump. If you're a Republican or Democrat who's more traditional, shall we say, in your politics, and you're prepared to oppose Robert F. Kennedy Jr., do you pay a political price in this scrambled political age we're living in, or is it just kind of politics as normal these days? Well,
I think the case of RFK Jr. makes it interesting because it's about whether you're going to make a stance on which issue. You know, we saw it play out today with Elizabeth Warren going after RFK Jr.'s stances on a myriad of things, but then you had other Democrats who were going after her about abortion. And I think things like that don't really resonate as far as some of the other concerns about vaccines. So the messages that came from the Democratic side seemed pretty disjointed, whereas there are real concerns on the Republican side as well on the issues of abortion, but also on how to handle some of the controversial things he said about Medicare, Medicaid, and how he would address those issues. But I think that by and large, Americans are appreciative of knowing, you know, we do need more transparency, and I think that is what he is offering. And as Republicans, we want less government oversight, but more transparency. And so the messaging there, I think that RFK Jr. is presenting is something that would be welcomed in that regards, but there are plenty of things that they could have hit on that didn't seem as streamlined as they could have made it.
So we hear so much about vaccines, but what about the character issue, Jaime? You look at Carolyn Kennedy, we played her earlier in the show, criticizing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on conduct grounds and on the vaccine grounds as well, but saying he's a predator. For Democratic senators, top Democrats in Congress that you know, are they looking at that issue as well?
Well, I think this is a slippery slope. You got to be very careful when you look at those type of issues. We just did this with Pete Hegseth, who's now the secretary, a few weeks ago. So I think here's the greater problem for Democrats. I think Democrats are having a hard time figuring out what is their premise of opposition. You know, you have a new Congress, a new president. Where does the Democratic Party stand? How do they oppose these plans by Donald Trump, particularly when it gets to these cabinet confirmations? And so I think, to your point, Maura, you saw today, these senators were all over the map. So I think if we cannot figure out a unified message against Donald Trump, the Democrats are going to have a hard time putting together a message in 2 years when it's time to re-elect Congress.
We were talking earlier in the show about this freeze or somewhat freeze of federal programs in terms of just spending. When you talk to voters, when you talk to candidates, you've worked with a lot of them over the years, does this break through as an issue? Because Democrats are saying they are getting concerns, but do you find Republicans are a little bit on edge now about some of these executive orders, especially when it comes to federal programs in their communities?
I think the issue here is the chaos that it created and the confusion and members not even being aware of what was going on. And if anything, people on Capitol Hill like to be, especially members of Congress, they want to be informed. Yep. They want to know before they're asked a question by reporters of what's going on, and they want to be included in what the plan is. And that disconnect was a real error by the White House staff by not briefing members and by not having a conversation and explaining it. They can cite all they want that it's the media's fault for why there was confusion, but in reality, members themselves were confused. And I do think that by and large, Republicans' issue, it has been from previous cycles and in the House as well, is this concern about can they govern? And if they can't get themselves together, they're going to have a problem.
Yeah. What about the federal workers? You almost see the Republicans baiting Democrats to become the party of the federal worker. The Republicans are being out front in that they want to shrink the federal workforce. They're offering people these buyouts or whatever you want to call them. It depends on whom you ask, but some way to get people to leave the federal workforce.
Look, I mean, I think President Trump is really great at politics. And I think he has done a great job over the last 8 years proving that. But over the last 8 days, he has not been good at politics. When you think about having the confusion of your core electorate questioning if they're going to get their checks, their Social Security checks, their Medicaid checks, you know, all of that, on top of eggs going up this week, on top of gas prices going up this week, on top of all of these things that are going to be really directly impactful to people's lives, politics are bad. So I think President Trump and his team got to figure out a way to kind of do the promises kept, promises made on the immigration front, on the other front for security, but they've really got to figure out a way to talk about economic issues. We're almost in the place where we were with Joe Biden just a couple months ago when they're telling us that things are getting better while they hide their hand and throw the stones at other things. And so until President Trump figures out how to get prices down, which is going to be very hard, we know that, it's almost impossible, he's in a politically fraught place, I think.
And what about President Trump? You see him flexing his executive power. And everyone in Washington, Democrat and Republican, seems to just kind of be accepting it for now. Is it bewilderment that's eventually going to lead to a little bit more reaction?
I actually think the most interesting thing is that his first bill, which was signed today, was a bipartisan bill.
Yep.
I mean, I think a lot of people went into this assuming Donald Trump was going to do a lot of executive orders and kind of run things however he felt he wanted to. But the fact that the first bill that he is signing today is a bipartisan measure and a campaign promise fulfilled about addressing an immigration order, he gets a little bit more credit for having done that. And I do think that at least the House side is going to step in right line behind him. There will be some more issues coming down the pipeline for Congress in general when it comes to the Senate. There'll be more of a backstop there to address the issues. But by and large, I do think that Trump has delivered on that promise, and they're kind of letting him have the run of the show, basically.
Yeah.
What's interesting, though, is that you did see bipartisan support for Laken Riley and that legislation. But how are Democrats going to handle all of this footage that keeps coming out hour by hour of ICE and DHS having these deportations, having military flights, bringing undocumented migrants back to their respective countries? So they're working with the president on some immigration issues. But you do hear many Democrats are alarmed about what's happening. Is there a strategy?
Well, I don't think there's a strategy yet, Bob. But I do think Democrats have got to be careful not to over-index. I think it's very clear with this past election that most Americans want to look at safety. They want this border to be safe, to feel safe, to have perception of safety. And so I think if you get into the way of that, that's going to hamper your politics in 2 years. However, the thing I'm most concerned about is the mayors and governors. So Democratic governors, Democratic mayors. You saw J.B. Pritzker just this week, the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, who is in a fraught position himself. And then you look at L.A. and other places. And so I think the mayors and the governors have got to figure out a way to both serve their citizens and also not over-index on protecting illegal immigrants, because that's not the issue of the moment. I think most Americans want to get as many illegal immigrants out of the country. And so I don't know what the strategy is going to be yet, but I do think you have to balance those two things, and the governors and the mayors are going to be the most important, even beyond Congress, for that.
So two sharp political minds. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., at this point, still a lot to be done. Does he get confirmed?
With Democratic support, I think he does. I know there are a lot of people who have questions about, we talked before about the role that Bill Cassidy will play in that support. And that's going to be a big decision for him to come being chairman of the Help Committee on the Senate side. It's going to be huge.
So Senator Cassidy, the one to watch for the Republicans. And will he get confirmed? Will he get some Democratic support?
I think he missed an opportunity with Senator Cassidy, my senator from Louisiana today. I think he should have been a lot more prepared for that question.
Yeah.
Haima Moore, Maura Gillespie, thank you for stopping by for our political chat.